Well, I find it sometimes a bit ironic when I'm meeting with a faculty and then sitting with a board and talking about classical Christian education. Because oftentimes I feel like I have no business doing that, like I'm some kind of an expert. Because I don't feel like I'm an expert. In fact, have any of you heard of the Left Behind series, the Left Behind series? About the end times. Some of us who've been a part of the renewal for a while, the classical Christian renewal, think we ought to write a series called the Less Behind series. Because it's not so much that we are out in advance of others, it's just that we're less behind. You still feel like you're trying to recover something that is so much bigger than you are. For example, have you ever gone to a beautiful cathedral or a big museum? Has anybody ever been to the New York Metropolitan Museum? How many of you have been to the British Museum? Anybody had the chance to go to London and see the British Museum? Yes, you in the back. She's my sister. When you go into the British Museum, what you see before you even get in the museum is the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is how we learned how to read ancient hieroglyphics, because along with hieroglyphics was a form of Greek. Helped us to crack the code. And you're not even in the museum yet. Well, how long would it take you to understand and enjoy the entire museum? A lifetime. So, we're going to talk about the liberating components, the liberating power of classical Christian education. But it's something so large that we can't ever fully really understand it and know it in a lifetime. It's big. How many of you have ever been to a big European cathedral or a big cathedral here in the U.S.? Where does your head go when you walk up? It goes up. It's designed that way. And what do you see when your head goes up at that window at the end, or the theme of the cathedral painted in fresco at the very top of the church? You begin to see that even the side chapels are in a kind of conversation with the whole. There's a cathedral in Orvieto that I get to see every summer because of a program that we lead there. It's the Duomo in Orvieto, dedicated to Mary, built in the 1300s. I've spent dozens of hours in that cathedral, and I still feel like a child in that cathedral. Even in one of the chapels, it's so rich and so harmonized with so many elements of beauty and art. Well, this is like classical Christian education. It's a beautiful tradition that will humble you and that you can never quite know. So I'm going to tell you just a couple of stories to kind of give you a context for what's been happening in the renewal of this tradition over really about 35 years now. And some of you are new to it, so it's still kind of, you kind of still find it a little bit, strange, or you're puzzled about a few things. And you're trying to understand something that's really big, and so your natural tendency is to generalize and say, oh, I know what classical education is, finally. It's studying Latin, that's what it is. It's a study of Latin. Well, yes and no. It's not just the study of Latin. Oh, I know, I got it. It's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The trivium. I learned what that means. It means the threefold way. That's what classical education is. Yes, but it's not the whole story. You're still just in one little chapel in the cathedral, or you're just in one room in the museum. There's more to it than that. Oh, I know what it is. It's reading great books, the best books. And I even have a quotation for you. The best that's been thought and said. Matthew Arnold said that. Yes, that's part of it. That's an important part. Do you see what I'm saying? By analogy, think about the time you came into the church, especially some of you who came into the church when you were, say, in college. How long did it take you to understand Christianity? Do you think you've got it all figured out? In my Father's house, there are many mansions. Yes, you can begin to understand it at a first level, but then you realize there's a depth to it, and you can keep going. Well, the classical Christian tradition of education is like getting to know the church, because it was really wed to the church. So it has all of this splendor and complexity that's associated with knowing the church of Jesus Christ. In fact, what we call classical Christian education was not really called that until about 1900. I'll give you a little story here about Coca-Cola by analogy. Did any of you ever have to take the Pepsi challenge? Did you take the Pepsi challenge? Pepsi came up with a formula that they thought would beat Coke, and they tested it in their labs. And when they were sure they were right, they rolled it out in a big advertising campaign. More people, when you take a blindfold taste test of Pepsi and Coke, choose Pepsi. And some of you remember the Pepsi challenge. They just beat up on Coke. And of course, Coke got a little nervous, and they went into their labs, and they did a blindfold taste test, and they found out that Pepsi was right. So they had to respond. They were the biggest soft drink company in the world. And so they went into their labs and began to work on a formula with doing all the taste testing, I assume, and they came out with an answer to Pepsi. And they called it
New Coke.
The New Coke. And how did the Coke fans respond? Not too happy. They were perfectly happy with the old Coke. They had taken the Pepsi challenge and didn't care. They were sticking with Coke. Coke fans began to write protest songs. They began to picket at the headquarters. People began to hoard cases of Coke and put in their bathrooms. They could drink it on into the future. Write letters and so forth. And Coke now had problem number 2, and it was worse than problem number 1. And in the midst of their studies, they discovered that they had made a mistake. The Pepsi challenge test was flawed. Do you know how it was flawed? If you would just take a sip of Pepsi and then a sip of Coke, more people would choose Pepsi because it was sweeter. So the first sweet response of your tongue is, I like that. But if you were to drink an entire can of Pepsi and an entire can of Coca-Cola, more people would prefer Coca-Cola. So the Coke fans were right. So what did Coke have to do now? They had to respond to their first response, which was a debacle. Do you remember what happened? What came after New Coke? Classical Coke. We all drink Coke here, don't we? Right with you, Coca-Cola. Why do we call the education we're trying to renew classical education? Because something new came along. Progressive modern education, starting in about 1900, and took the ascendancy over time. That's its own story. What did we call classical education before 1900? We called it education. That's right. So when you hear that word classical, it can throw you for a little bit of a loop, because, well, why do we call it classical? Because the word classical connotes various things that can make us feel comfortable or uncomfortable. It can sound like a classy restaurant. It can also sound a little bit elite, like only the really smart people can get this kind of education. Only the people who can have the money to get this kind of education. And it can sound elitist and aristocratic. The word classical comes from the Latin word classis, which meant a fleet of ships first. And like a naval battle group going out needs to be well ordered. And even today that's the case. Aircraft carrier in the center, destroyers and minesweepers out front, planes and helicopters. It's all very well ordered. And so this idea of orderliness and rank, we have classes here at school. First grade, second grade, third grade. There's an order to it, a hierarchy, a progression. It also has this idea of something of enduring excellence, like classic rock, classical literature, the books that don't need to be written again, the books of enduring excellence that are good for any human being at any time. So already, just take the word classical, we already are having problems understanding what we're talking about. Think of the first person someone who comes to the school who's never heard about classical Christian education and say, oh, we have classical education here. They might be thinking of Jethro Tull. What does that connote? Only the people over 40 were laughing at that. High school students have no idea who that is. And then we take the word education. Well, we do really good education. We're into education. Well, what does education even mean? That's hard to define. What is an education? That's a national debate. Okay, so it can be challenging, but we have been renewing this form, and I haven't defined it for you yet, but I'll give you a definition. Well, just, if I were to ask you right now, could you come up here, please? Would you please come up here? Just kidding. Would you come up here, please? We need a doctor. We need a doctor here. If you were to come up here and give us a 1-minute description of classical Christian education, what would you say? The same way you get a little tongue-tied when someone says to you, tell me about your Jesus. What is the Christian faith? How long did it take you to know how to summarize that in a minute or two? And how hard is that? So, we're on a journey to recover this, and it's taking a while to become discipled in it, to become mentored in it. I've been working on it for 20 years. I still feel small. So it's okay to not know this tradition very well right now, because we're trying to build a bridge back to it, and we're trying to get something for ourselves that that was not given to us, and we're trying to give something to our children that was not given to us. We are the bridge building generation, and it's hard, and it's a slow work, and Americans don't like slow work. Americans like fast work. We can start companies overnight. You want to start a company with me? You can get the paper submitted on the internet tonight, and we'll be operating next week. That's one of the strengths of Americans. We like to do things fast. We want to know the DNA of it. Give it to us, we'll do it. But you cannot rebuild a city that way. It's going to take some time. So will you be patient as we do this? And as we do it imperfectly and gradually grow into this? That's what's necessary. The bridge that we have built back to this tradition is wobbly. And that's my story. About 20 years ago, I heard that there was going to be a school starting across the river in Harrisburg, across the Susquehanna, called Covenant Christian Academy. And I was a classics minor in college, and when someone said they're going to teach Latin to third graders, I said, you're kidding me, that's cool. I always thought I would teach my own kids some Latin and Greek. And you're going to teach Latin to third graders? So I was interested, and that began the crazy odyssey. And I was so interested that when we were interviewing to possibly enroll my first grader, Zoe, into the school, the board members that were interviewing me said, you're quite enthusiastic about this Latin business. We're taking applications for the position of headmaster. Would you be interested? And 2 or 3 weeks later, I was on the job as a headmaster of a classic Christian school. We started with grades K through 5 with 22 students. Those are small classes. We were doing some tutoring, right? And it was 10 years of riding the tiger, trying to learn about this tradition while I was trying to lead a school to do it. We made a lot of mistakes. We learned some things in the School of Hard Knocks, to be sure. Started reading, started thinking, started talking to anybody I could. There was one school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes away. They were a veteran school because they started 1 year before we did. I would go there and ask Ty Fisher, what mistakes have you made that I don't want to make? And we would learn. And people were publishing materials for the first time, we were starting to teach Latin to elementary school kids for the first time in about 75 years. So someone had to write some texts, and the first texts were great works, but they were first-gen works. And then there needed to be eventually a second-gen works as we learned how to do this better. And on it goes. So this board took a chance on me because they had no other choice. I realized later I was taking a chance on them as well. And then the first 15 families were taking a chance on all of us. And the teachers, we were all taking chances on one another. And the church that leased the building to us, they were taking a chance on us. We really didn't know what we were doing. But we had a vision. We knew that it was done well in the past. We knew that the great minds of the past, name any of them before, say, 1870, they were all classically and Christianly educated for the most part. You think about the founding fathers. You think about a Jonathan Edwards. You think about a Martin Luther. You think about a Martin Luther King even had something of a classical education even in the 50s there, what was left of it. The great people who became leaders of culture throughout the world were classically educated because it took centuries of trial and error to figure out how to best humanize people to be the fullest versions of themselves so that they could love God better and serve their neighbor better. That was the purpose of a classical Christian education. Now it had a number of dimensions, and that's what makes it kind of difficult. Like the 7 blind men looking at the elephant, we think, oh, it's Latin, oh, it's Greek, oh, it's history, oh, it's a great book, oh, it's a trivium, no, it's a quadrivium, no, it's a trivium and a quadrivium. Well, it's all of these things in some kind of a harmony, but we don't have the harmony yet. And we've got all the choir members up to sing, but that's not sounding quite right yet. So I enrolled my daughter in first grade. I became the headmaster. I wore a lot of hats. I was even a basketball coach for one brief moment, one splendid moment, when the basketball coach was traveling and there was a basketball tournament, and I took the team to the tournament, and I became the coach. I went 1-1 in my basketball career. Not too bad. In 500, I retired. I was a Latin teacher at the school. I even created songs and chants. Okay, once I taught second grade. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. These are the 12 sons of Jacob. Hey, again! That's the 10 little Indians. We tended to use that tune far too often. But I taught them the 12 tribes. And I learned things just by being a carpool dad. I was getting my classical education along with my kids. And that's the secret. Just travel with your kids and try to learn with them. But it will take you 13 years. So take the long view. I can tell you what all the major components of a sentence are. The sentence is complete. When 5 simple rules, it meets. It has a subject, and a verb. It makes sense with every word. Add a capital letter and an end mark too. Hey, you guys know that. I learned this in the car because my children would sing it. Even when I wanted them to stop singing, they would sing it because they love to sing. And that's a part of the classical ideal. Our brothers and sisters who preceded us observed that children love to sing and they learn by singing. So why not teach them the most important things you want them to remember forever by singing? Now, by the time the kids get to about 8th grade, they're like, Mr. Johnson, please. But when they're young, they will sing and they will sing and they will sing. And they want to sing about 5 to 10 times more than we do. So I learned as we went. I even became an urgent care doctor. You know, when I got my PhD, I became Dr. Perrin around the school. And little girls would come to my office. You know, I'm talking about the first graders and second graders. Dr. Perrin, yes. I hurt myself. I skinned myself right here. Oh, okay. Oh, come on in. It doesn't look too bad, but it hurts. Okay, well, why don't you go to the water fountain, have a drink, and I think you'll feel better. If you still hurt, then you come back. But I think you can go back to class. It really hurt. Okay, well, I can put a Band-Aid on it. Can I have the red one with the bears? And one time, there's these sisters going to our school, and one of the sisters was younger, one was older, and the older one, her name is Reagan. She walked through the sliding glass window in her home, and she cut her leg, and she had to get stitches. It just so happened in her neighborhood there was a surgeon, it was a friend. And so they went to him, and he got out his kit, and he sewed up her stitches, her wound on the spot. She was going to bed that night with her sister, the younger girl, Michaela. But Reagan said, Dr. Vanderhart, he's the best doctor in the world. And Michaela said, no, Dr. Perrin's the best doctor. And this is when I realized people thought I was a medical doctor. But occasionally something would happen that was serious. Like one time a first grade boy was brought into my office named Shane. And Shane, African-American boy, cute as a button, but could not blow his nose. He had put a raisin in his nose. And the teacher said, I think he put a raisin in his. I was like, what? And so I said to my assistant, and meanwhile, these tears coming out of his eyes, his mucus, and I said, Shane, blow. Shane, blow your nose. I pressed one of his nostrils. Shane, blow. So I said to my assistant, Nancy, there is a flashlight in the toolkit. Bring me the toolkit. So she brings the toolkit, and I'm looking up his nose, and I see the little wrinkly raisin in there. And in the toolkit are a pair of needle nose pliers. And I was sharing with the board that I'm an adapter. And I could just send him home, and they could go to the emergency room or something like that, or I could just try just one time. Lord help me. Lord help me. Because I am Dr. Perrin. And so I say, and my assistant Nancy's looking at me, what? And then the first grade teacher is there, Carol, and I say, Carol, hold his head. She's like, what? Hold it really still. And I'm just going to try this one time. So say a prayer. First try comes right out. I told that to the board. They were horrified. And then they laughed. And they said, please don't do that again. And then for Christmas, they gave me a fine set of needle nose pliers, which I did use again, but on some braces with a wire sticking out. The dentist wrote me a note the next day saying, nice job. That's what happens when we're trying to renew things and having and learn as we go. The president of the board is of the founding board of Covenant Christian Academy, where I serve in Harrisburg, a medical doctor named Rich Rayner. He stood up in a meeting like this with prospective families, and he said, I'm Dr. Rich Rayner, I'm a physician, I'm very highly trained and very poorly educated. And that set the tone for the beginning of our renewal, because we had lost the idea of what an education was. Now, Rich Rayner is now a very interesting doctor, because for the last 20 years, he has been getting the education that he missed. But he realized that he was not well educated. What's the difference between education and vocational training? Americans don't even know. We don't know that the word education, from the Latin educatio, meant the unfolding of a human soul, the leading out and unfolding and development of a human being to become the fullest version of himself or herself. It wasn't job training. Job training is good and fine. It's just the second thing that follows an education. For example, learning how to be a wheelwright, learning how to be a blacksmith. These are trade skills that are important. Coding is a skill, but it's not an education. An education is acquiring the arts that allow us to be the most fully human we can be. And their arts are called the liberal arts because they liberate. And there were traditionally 7 of them. And they're the arts that enable us to master language and communication and reasoning and thinking and quantifying and measuring and assessing. The verbal arts and the mathematical arts, together called the 7 liberal arts that set men and women free. You talk to someone who's even a professor at a liberal arts college, and 9 times out of 10, the professor can't even tell you what the 7 liberal arts are. Because it's an echo of an echo. Some of you went to a liberal arts college. I think I had a liberal arts education. What is a liberal arts education? I think it's those things that you study when you don't want a job. That's how people think about it. Oh, it's that leisurely stuff that doesn't really matter. Makes you refine and be good. I don't know what it is. Even professors, and I've done this a couple of times. So what do you think, sir, what are the liberal arts? And they will say, well, English, philosophy, maybe history. No, those aren't the liberal arts. They're also the playgrounds of the liberal arts. The liberal arts find expression in those areas, but they're not the liberal arts. And then did you know that? You might have thought, I studied English. Well, no, it's not technically not even the liberal arts. So what are the liberal arts? Could you name them? Would you like to come up now? What are they? How can we recover something when we don't even know their names? We don't even have a vocabulary for education anymore. And even the people who have the PhDs, they're just mouthing the words. And the worst would be, I'm sorry if this defines someone in your family, the education professors. There isn't an education department in the country that's renewing classical education, because education now in the universities is all about the progressive model of education. And the education doctorates have not studied this at all. They've studied from about 1890 to the present. That's it, except for maybe one course where they did a survey of the history and philosophy of education. What you study when you get your education doctorate is school administration and curriculum, and school leadership, not philosophy, and you don't go deep in any of the liberal arts. So of course they're not going to be interested except at Hillsdale College. It's the only department of education that has embraced classical education as its philosophy. Isn't that interesting? We've lost. So what are the liberal arts? Aren't you interested?
Yeah.
Some of you are like, what are they? Okay, well. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The arts of language. Arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. The arts of mathematics. Also given birth to things like physics, right? And these arts enable us to create bodies of knowledge that we call the sciences, like say biology and chemistry. But these 7 liberal arts are the arts of humanity. You've heard of the humanities, right? Have any of you gotten a humanities education? Well, it used to be that a humanities education were these 7 liberal arts. And they were preparatory to your professional training. If you were going to be an engineer or a doctor or whatever you would seek to be, you needed the 7 liberal arts first, because that's what humanized you and gave you the ability to really do with excellence anything you put your hand to. So everybody needed the 7 liberal arts, those arts that are appropriate for you as human beings. Mastering language, when is that not helpful and relevant to master language? Grammar, the art of studying how language means, how to interpret correctly, how to speak with clarity and brevity and accuracy. The structure not just of one language, but all language. Logic, the study of correct reasoning and by implication incorrect reasoning, the logical fallacies. When is that not helpful? Wouldn't you like it if our politicians knew some logic? And how about rhetoric? The art of persuasive speaking and writing. Have you ever won the argument and lost the person? Because we don't just make decisions based on a logical argument. We still have to be persuaded. We're not just logic machines. We're logical, but not only logical. Don't you wish that our politicians had studied some rhetoric? And it doesn't matter whether it's on the left or the right or in between. There is a great absence of logic and reasoning and careful thought and decorated, beautiful, pleasant speak. Cicero said that good speaking should move, instruct, and inspire. But we don't have any public servants. We have very few public servants who have that ability anymore. When is logic and rhetoric not going to be relevant to a profession that you have in mind? And then the quadrivium arts are the mathematical arts. Because not only do we use language, we use number. We are made not only to understand things with words, but with number. And that's how we assess, that's how we move in the physical world, how we assess, how we measure, how we quantify, how we predict. And numbers, we find, are not just practical, they're also imaginative and beautiful. We were talking about this as a faculty. Mathematics include these things called numbers that are invisible, immaterial, and unchangeable and eternal. That's why you rarely find a mathematician who's an atheist. Because have you ever come across a 3? Only in my mind. And then these things that occur in our imaginations have these very structured relationships. And apparently, it's in my mind and it's in your mind, and we can talk about this and understand one another. How in the world can that be? So mathematics is beautiful and mysterious. It involves puzzle, play, and proof. And mathematics is to be enjoyed, not just learned as a skill so you can make change at a cash register. And when you look at the people who are who have been liberally educated, they have a kind of freedom that we lack. They are able to do things that we can't do. It's like they've been to Hogwarts. And they can make things levitate. They have powers. And this is what every student wants, the full capacitation of the powers that have been put into us by virtue of being made in the image of God. We want to be like God. We want to resemble Him. We want to know His world. We find ourselves in this beautiful cosmos, which is a beautiful place, wanting to possess it, know it, understand it, and to do so with our friends, our fellows, and to enjoy being here, and to create things because we are little creators made in the image of the Creator. So who are the people creating culture in our society? They're the people who have the freedom to do so. Freedom doesn't simply mean freedom from. There's another word for that. Liberty from something, like liberty from the tyranny of King George. We call that license, when you just are free, when the restraints are all gone so you can do whatever you want. That's license. But freedom the freedom to be able to do the things that you yearn to do but don't have the ability to do, that's true liberty. The liberty to start a company that will do something that no other company has done before. Because you've learned how to integrate all of your technical know-how with the needs of human beings, with the study of literature, with imaginative communication, being able to integrate various kinds of technological platforms with great communication skills. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, the co-founder of Apple, said that Apple is the intersection of the liberal arts and technology. His favorite course in college, before he dropped out? Calligraphy. Beauty was important, very important to Steve Jobs. And some of you Apple lovers, don't you like the elegance of Apple? Don't you like the beauty of Apple? It's by design, by somebody who studied the liberal arts and calligraphy, for goodness sake. What did Mark Zuckerberg study? What did he love most? Greek and Greek philosophy. Did he have to learn how to code? Sure, of course. That's a skill that you can learn on the internet. But to learn how to think, to learn how to be imaginative, to learn how to combine numbers and words in masterful ways, takes working with people and texts and your fellows over time, over years. That sets you free. You could ask that college professor the same question. You could ask him this question. Why are the liberal arts called liberal? Would you like to come up and answer that question? Why are the liberal arts called liberal? I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on you all night. It's just random. She's going to come up and shame me in a minute. She'll say, I'm going to tell you what the liberal arts. The liberal arts are called liberal because they're for freedom. The word liber could also mean book, bark of a tree, book. Because in the ancient world, if you couldn't read and write, you were a slave. Only the free people could enter into contractual relations and protect themselves because they could read. You're free if you know these arts, if you have command over language. And it preserves your freedom, and it gives you the capacity to do things that you otherwise couldn't do. It's freedom in that sense too. Okay, why are they called arts? I didn't know this stuff for a long time. Okay, I'm acting like, yes, that's something you don't know. No. I didn't know this for years. I had to study and talk to them. What is this word? Where does it come from? Why are they called? Why isn't it just a subject? Why don't we call them the liberal subjects? Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Why are they arts? What do artists do? They make things. Because the liberal arts make you a liberal artist so that you can create and make things using words and numbers. What do you make with words? Someone tell me. What are some of the things we make with this? Not just a rhetorical question. What do we make with words? Somebody. Songs, sonnets. What else? Poems. Books. What kind of books? Well, we can name several, right? Novels, novellas, nonfiction, reports, lab reports. What else we make with words? Speeches, political speeches, debates. Everything we do, advertisements, whatever, tweets. Like to see a little better tweeting? The hope is right there at this table there. The tweets that will come from this crowd change the course of our. When they're not singing in Latin, they'll be tweeting. So we become artists. What I want to do as I close is just bring you a little report as to what's happening and encourage you to stay with it. Yes, you're in a big museum and there's more to discover. And when you're frustrated and something doesn't seem to work right, could you trust this tradition that maybe it is the best for you and your children, even though you're frustrated and don't understand something at the moment? Because we have to trust the wisdom of those who've gone before us. Chesterton calls that the democracy of the dead. We need to give a vote even to those people who came before us who were wise, like St. Augustine, like Thomas Aquinas, like Martin Luther, like Jonathan Edwards, like all of these great people from the past who would say to us, this is how you raise up your sons and daughters. I think we even see it in the scripture in various ways. Tradition comes from the Latin trago tradere, which means to hand over or to hand down. We get the word trade from it. This is something that's been handed down to you. It's valuable. It's worth you preserving and taking it, curating it, learning from it, and then giving it to your children. At times you will feel like it's awkward and you'll feel like you're groping and stumbling. You'll feel like your kids are getting smarter than you. You'll feel like, you'll have this schizophrenic response that I've had, a dual response of exhilaration, like this is remarkable and good, why, I'm so glad that I'm encountering this, and resentment, who kept this from me in my early years? Why am I hearing about this now at age 38? I needed this a long time ago, and it's already too late for my son. He's 7. But you'll need to be patient with yourself as you travel. We are the generation that's trying to build the bridge back. They're the generation that's going to strengthen it and turn our bamboo rope swing bridge into something made of strong wood. And their kids will be the generation that builds it out of stone. What's been lost over 2 or 3 generations will take 2 or 3 generations to rebuild. There is no McDonald's franchise manual for doing this. It's a slow work, and that's going to be frustrating to all of us at times. We will do it imperfectly. In order to get a license to teach in the Middle Ages, to get your Master of Arts, you had to be a master, a licensed master, to teach all 7 of these liberal arts. We still use the phrase MA, Master of Arts. But the MA has not mastered all 7 of the liberal arts. Because we have fragmented education into majors. We only did that about 100 years ago. If you were to go to Harvard in 1835 or 1840, you didn't need to choose a major. Everybody took a classical curriculum because that's what everybody needed. It was understood that everybody needed that. You know, a ambidextrous batter who can bat from the left or right side of the plate is a double threat. In acting, somebody who can not only act well, but can sing well is a double threat, can get more jobs. And if they can also dance well, they're a triple threat. Those triple threat actors, that's what all actors want to be. They want to be able to sing, dance, and act. Well, an MA is a sevenfold threat. If you met somebody who would become a master of the 7 liberal arts, you would be tempted to bow down before them and worship them. They're very rare in this cultural moment. But these kids have a chance of getting there. And what happens when they're teaching the next generation of kids? And when their kids are teaching the next generations? We will then be creating cultural leaders of wonderful variety. Whether they are plumbers or professors or presidents, it won't matter. Wherever they go, they will bring a leavening and a depth and a delight and a humanity that our culture so badly needs. So in conclusion, will you work on this bridge together? Will you work on this wobbly bridge? Will you join the some 500 private and classical Christian schools that have started around the country? You're not the only one. There are hundreds of them now, and more starting all the time. And the classical homeschoolers. There are 1,500 classical Christian cooperatives in smaller groups of students who are doing classical Christian education. There are now almost 100 colleges that are dialing into the renewal of classical Christian education and saying, we want to be a part of that. We want to serve your students when they graduate. Hillsdale College, you probably have heard about, would be one of those colleges, and that's starting to lead in this regard. And there are many other colleges. My daughter graduated from Grove City College in Pittsburgh, not too far away. Same deal. They're multiplying. Because, you know why? Because the students who were classically educated started coming to these colleges, and the professors began to note. Because some kid in a freshman class would say, well, as Aristotle says in his Metaphysics, all knowledge begins in wonder. Oh, professor, wait. It's a freshman class. When did you ever read Aristotle? Well, in my high school. And the professors, the word got out. And now, at our small school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, we graduate about 15 students a year. Colleges come to recruit from that pool. They send admissions officers to visit that school for one of those 15 students. There are 350,000 people in the Harrisburg metropolitan area. We graduate 15 students a year. The highest SAT scores in the area are from that little school. And that doesn't even matter. SAT scores are the last, well, they're not that important of a measure, but people understand the SAT score, so it's good to say it. When our first class of 6 students were about ready to graduate, all of our parents were saying, how are they going to do on the SAT? How are they going to do? I don't know. I think that we think the curriculum is doing its work. And our sister schools that are before us, like that veteran school in Lancaster, that's 1 year older than me. And so finally the scores came back, and 3 out of 6 of our kids were National Merit finalists, 1 a recommended scholar. So we began to say 50% of our students. That's never happened again. That's not even what's important. But it communicates to the broader community that something good must be happening in these little schools. The small schools are delivering the best results. And some of you are going to be tempted when your kid becomes of high school age to think he really needs an auditorium, swimming pool at the high school. He might be able to make it in high school soccer. The coach says he's pretty good, so maybe we need to go to the local high school and he can try the soccer team. All kinds of temptations will come your way, but the best educated kids in this area, I guarantee you, will be your seniors. They, in the long term, will be the ones having the greatest impact in the culture of the Detroit area. So you're not just investing in your in children. You're investing in this community and this city. Even the elite colleges are small. There's only 4,000 undergraduates at Princeton. We think big is always better. Big high schools are a new phenomenon in history. You can only know 150 people. You need to be educated by great teachers who know their students, who have relationships of love. If you were lucky enough to get into Oxford University, you would be educated by one professor and with 2 or 3 students. Because that's the best way to be educated, relationally, small groups, with qualified teachers, with your friends that you can actually know. By analogy, when you go to a restaurant, you're not thinking for your anniversary that you might go to the Walmart food court. You want to go to a nice restaurant where there's candlelight and there's music playing, and maybe where the host knows your name, and you go to that table in the corner and you order your favorite wine off the menu. That's what you love. And why do you want to send your kid to a high school with a graduating class of 500 students? Because they're going to be socialized better? Because they're going to learn the real world? These kids have smartphones. They know the real world better than you do. Their problem is not the real world. So we have to start thinking with new paradigms. And the tradition starts telling us this. So please, join, stay, partner, encourage one another over time to rebuild this bridge. The time might just be for these students and yourselves to get this education that we so much need in our culture. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great to be here.